Hello and welcome to this next part of our Growing Small Firms topic area, where we're going to be looking at growth models and this time focusing on integrated models. So far we've been looking at how to conceptualize small business growth, and we've been looking at literature in two specific areas: size distribution studies and growth studies. In this session, we continue our exploration of growth studies, and we're going to be looking at integrated models, and these tend to emphasize the role of the entrepreneur in the development of the business. So what does the research have to say on integrated models? Well, we can refer to McPherson and Holt in 2007, who reviewed the empirical evidence on small business growth. And they state that the studies identify that the entrepreneur, the firm, and the available social and business networks act as mechanisms through which this is achieved. Inevitably, these three elements are not discrete. In other words, they cannot really be easily separated. They comment on, first of all, the entrepreneur. The small firm literature has tended to emphasize the role and characteristics of the entrepreneur in shaping small firm growth. So here, for example, we can look at the work of Story in 1994. Yes, I know it's early again, but it's still pretty relevant. Plus the material that we explored in topic 3 when we were looking at who the entrepreneurs were. Now, if you press pause here, you'll be able to look at Story's table in much more depth. But basically identifies a number of characteristics about the entrepreneur that are significant factors in growing small enterprises. Also, Gundry and Welsh in 2001 contextualised their explorations as the ambitious entrepreneur. They consider the factors that determine the performance of a group of 832 US-based, again, women-owned enterprises. They contrasted between the characteristics of high-growth and low-growth companies. Basically, they compared the characteristics of the fastest and the slowest-growing third of their sample. The middle third was dropped completely from the analysis. The table reproduced their paper summarises their evidence on the characteristics and the background of the entrepreneurs, and we can see that here. And you can see some of the significant statistics that they identified in their study in this table here. In particular, we can say that the years of experience in the industry is super important, followed by the years of business experience of the entrepreneur. So, for McPherson and Holt, and for others, the entrepreneur emerges as a significant source of firm or enterprise growth. McPherson and Holt also comment on the firm or resource-based literature. This tends to emphasise the internal management capabilities of the organisation, particularly in the areas of resource management, production, R&D, finance and marketing, again as being significant to firm growth. And thirdly, McPherson and Holt comment on alliances and networks in studies of firm growth and performance. These are generally seen as helping firms overcome internal resource constraints, but may also be rationalised in terms of their ability to reduce transaction costs. And finally, they comment on the effectiveness of alternative policy instruments in supporting firm growth. Story, for example, provides a review of this literature, and Fraser and Roper and Hart provide more specific UK-based examples. Gundry and Welsh also draw some wider conclusions on the attributes of high-growth entrepreneurs and their firms. For them, there are several significant factors that contribute towards ambitious or high-growth entrepreneurs. High-growth entrepreneurs, for example, seem to have a stronger entrepreneurial intensity. They focus more on market expansion and technological change, and they have a greater willingness to incur opportunity costs. They emphasise more team-building organisational structures when developing and establishing their firms. And they also utilise a wider range of financing sources. But there are also strategic success factors involved here as well. The reputation and image of the firm is very important, product service quality, and the amount of cash that's in the firm is also important, as is the leadership effectiveness. So as an example of this broader integrated model in practice, we can look at some research by Noisy in 2003. They explored the importance of alliances as drivers of growth among Canadian biotech companies. A sample was 60 firms, so not huge but still significant. 30 of these were fast-growing firms and 30 were slower enterprises, and looked at the reasons for being in the high-growth group. Found several key results. So first of all, firm age and sector were only marginally significant in explaining whether a firm was likely to experience high growth. Exporting firms, though, were more likely to be in the high growth category, and firms receiving venture capital support were also more likely to be in the high growth category. But what's really interesting is that it was the firms with alliances, so connections of some sort to other firms, they were also more likely to be in the high growth category. And it was this that had the strongest statistical effect. So at this point in time, how can we have a go at building a truly integrated model? Wicklund et al. In 2009 has had a go. They went back to the research and subsequently have identified 5 key strands from the literature they argue is crucial for high growth development. First of all, they identify that the role of the entrepreneur is important. So this is not just about enterprises and markets. They also identify that markets, legislative and regulatory environments are also important, as is the strategic fit between the firm and the wider market conditions. Fourthly, they point to the resources of the firm, again super important for high growth development, and the attitudes and ambition of the entrepreneur. In drawing their research conclusions, they seek then to test their hypotheses on data on 413 Swedish small firms, and they estimate using structural equation modelling of small business growth and entrepreneurial orientation. So some of the key relationships that emerge from their data set are illustrated here. And as you can see, some of these factors contribute towards entrepreneurial orientation. Some of the factors contribute directly towards small firm growth. And some factors contribute towards entrepreneurial orientation that impacts small firm growth.
Okay, for now though, I think it's time for your last question of this section. I want to ask you, do you think the entrepreneur really does matter? If he or she does, what do you think the implications are for research? Now, when you pause and reflect on this question, why don't you cast your mind back to our topic 3 area where we looked at the characteristics of entrepreneurs. And we seem to identify that some characteristics do indeed seem to encourage entrepreneurial behaviour. Press pause, reflect, and then when you're finished, you can move on.